so much for coming tonight. How's everybody doing?
Good.
So tonight we're going to talk about data. Specifically, we're going to talk about how we apply data and how we use data, both qualitative and quantitative, in order to build better products, which is it is something that is very close to my heart. But before we start, who's just the tiniest bit tired of hearing about data? Anybody? You can be honest. I won't kick you out, I promise. I'm kind of tired of hearing about data. I mean, like, you can't walk into a Starbucks these days without hearing somebody talk about, like, oh, we're doing A/B testing, now we're doing funnel analysis, now we're doing cohort analysis, and blah, blah, blah. It's enough to make you want to make your own coffee. But here's the thing, I'm going to talk about it some more, and I'm going to talk about it for a really important reason. And that reason is that I think, my hypothesis, if you will, is that if you use data well, you can build better products. Sometimes. So here's the thing. If you use data badly, you can really screw yourself up. And believe me, there are people who are doing absolutely horrific things with numbers. All right, numbers, metrics, analytics, whatever you want to call them. Data can be really, really helpful in creating great products, but not if you just collect an enormous amount of it and then don't do the right thing with it. And here are some of the things that I want to point out that quantitative data don't do well. Quant doesn't replace design. The whole idea that we can just throw things out into the world and A/B test our way to a wonderful product is possibly the worst thing that has come out of sort of the rise of big data. Data don't replace designers. Data enhance designers. It also doesn't replace listening to users. It can give us another channel for getting feedback, it's true, but it doesn't replace watching or interacting with real humans who are using our actual product. That's still important. It also doesn't tell us what we should be building. It only gives us information about what we have built. Does some things pretty well, though. Does inform design. We can do a lot of wonderful things with data to help us understand our designs better and to help us understand what's working and what isn't. And it can give us very important feedback on our product decisions. Metrics can help us understand whether our decisions helped or hurt user behavior. They also help inform research, and they tell us what we should be looking into. We're going to get into that in just a second. But that's enough high-level blather. Let's look at it. Let's look at an example. I want you to imagine a funnel. It's not just any funnel. It's a checkout funnel. This funnel is part of your product for now. Let's say that you have a software as a service business or some kind of e-commerce product, just for the sake of this example. And it allows people to sign up and it allows people to pay you for something. Those are my very favorite types of funnels. The kind where you actually, at the end of it, collect some money from somebody. For this particular product, you will notice there are some steps that one might go through. Now, I am not saying that these are the correct steps. In fact, one might argue that there are too many of them. One might argue that they are in the wrong order. That is fine. There is a way to figure that out, and that's what we're going to do right now. Now, this is one of the reasons why I don't like to call them funnels. The whole idea of a funnel is that you pour things into the top and it all comes out the bottom. And that is clearly not what is happening here. This is more like a sieve. All right? So you can see, if you put a bunch of people in at the top, and at the very first step, we are losing 20% of the people that we poured into the top. And then at each step of the funnel, we're losing some more folks. So that's sieve-like. Here it is translated to numbers, and I am going to beg you to please not go back and check my math. Probably close to right. But it's close enough for this example. But what this is showing us is that for every 100 people that we pour into the top of the funnel, we get 18 out the bottom. That's not good. I mean, you could actually argue that for, if you're looking at conversion rates on a lot of sites, like, 1 to 2% is great. We're not talking about conversion rates on sites. We're talking about somebody actually went to the top of your funnel. They had an intent to buy something. They entered the checkout funnel, and then they just started falling out the sides of it, and only 18 of them came out the bottom. And what that means is that you've acquired and gotten people who are interested in buying your product, 100 of them, probably through fairly expensive means. You probably bought them through Google AdWords or Facebook or having people refer. People's time has value too. And only 18 of them are actually successfully giving you money. So, if we look at the funnel, some of the steps look less good than others. That 36 looks pretty bad. So that's the payment info screen, and that is clearly a friction point, right? 36 people are falling out of the bottom, or falling out, of the payment info screen. That means they hit that screen, they leave the page. Anybody have any guesses why? Why are they falling out here? I'll bet you could come up with some ideas, right?
It's too expensive.
It's too expensive, that's one of them. Anybody else have any ideas why they're falling out there?
Payment option is
not secure.
Yes, payment options, not clear, they don't feel secure. You can come up with all sorts of reasons, and the reason that I know this is that I have gone through this exercise with tons of companies, with their funnels, not with this one, but with their own funnels. And what happens when I show them this is that they immediately start coming up with great ideas for why people are falling out right there. Maybe they don't feel secure, maybe we should put a lock on the page. They immediately start coming up with solutions to the problems that they've decided based on literally a number. I want you to stop it. Don't do that. It's fine, I asked you to do it, so it's totally fine that you did it this time. It was part of it. I forgive you. But when you start coming up with reasons that people fall out of funnels based simply on a number, what you are doing is you are trying to use quantitative data for something that they cannot do. You are trying to use them to explain rather than describe. See, if you really want to understand a friction point, like what I showed you, you need to do two things. You need to find it. That's what we did with the funnel, right? That's where metrics and analytics, we found a friction point. And then you need to understand it. You need to explain it. Why is it happening? That's where qualitative research comes in. Because, and I swear to God, this slide is in every deck that I give. You can say it with me. Quantitative data tell you what is happening. Qualitative data tell you why it is happening. This, like, if you learn or remember literally nothing else that I ever say, just remember this. That's pretty much the whole talk. So, if quant tells you what and qual tells you why, how do you put them together to make something that, works in the real world? How do you use them together to build a better product? So, I'm going to take you through a way that it might work. And for this example, we're going to imagine that you already have, a product that's out in the world, because of course that's the best way to collect quantitative data of this sort. So, the first step in the process, just to be clear, this is a process that I'm going through, and you'll see at the end it's not the only one. The first step in this process, though, is to identify the biggest problem. I mean, there's no reason to spend a lot of time working on a problem that isn't very big quantitatively, right? Like, if you're already getting 100% of your people through the funnel, or if you're losing, one person, fine, go work on something else. Get work on acquisition. So, as we saw earlier, if we want to understand, or if we want to identify the biggest problem, one of the ways to do that is use these funnel metrics, just like we did. They're not the only kind of metrics that you could use at this point, but they are outstanding for really identifying places that people are falling out of your product or a particular a series of steps. So, and you might remember from our funnel, which was like literally 30 seconds ago, okay, virtually 30 seconds ago, it was probably 4 minutes, that the payment info was a particularly large problem. Great. That's quantitative data. We're using quantitative data, identify the problem, but we don't know why it's a problem, and that is step 2. So for step 2 of this particular problem, we might use something called observational usability. Now, observational usability is a wonderful qualitative research technique that I like to refer to as watching people use your damn product. All right? And it involves, unsurprisingly, watching people use your damn product. The reason that you want to do this is because you want to understand all of the pain that you are inflicting upon them. I mean, it's not fun, but, well, I mean, it can be. Sort of depends on your attitude, but you really want to, all that you do is you watch people use your product and you observe where they're getting stuck. You watch them go through, so in this particular case, you would probably have them go through the funnel and you'd have them go through the payment, the whole payment process, and you would pay particular attention to the people who were getting stuck on that payment step. Now, based on your observation of between 4 and 6 people, because that is the correct number of people to do this for this sort of observational usability study for reasons that I am totally not going to go into right now, you might come up with these sorts of observations, and you will notice some of them are the kinds of observations that we all came up with because, in fact, I've done this research 1,000 times, and these were the kinds of observations that we came up with. Your mileage may vary. Don't use these as a substitute for actually doing the work yourself because you could be screwing up in an entirely different way. But these were some of the ways that I saw this funnel get screwed up before, all right? And so, for example, you might find that some of the people didn't have payment info handy, or some of the people were confused by specific wording, or oh, everybody saw that promo code box and wandered off. Maybe everybody ended up at Retail Me Not or whatever it is to try to find the coupon code for your particular product. That's interesting. One thing I like to note is when I'm doing this kind of research, I actually like to show when I'm doing reports, I actually like to show in funnels the people falling out there. This is just a little sort of aside for communicating things to your team. If you show them here, sometimes I show little people like jumping out of the funnel. It's just very evocative, and people kind of get like, oh, we lost 36 people. Wow, 36, oh, that's kind of a lot of people. So, of course, now that you've observed all those possible problems, you've observed all these huge problems, now you need to figure out which of these problems, solving which of these problems is actually going to fix your metric problem, right? So it could be that every single one of these problems is affecting the numbers in exactly the same way, or that they're all equally bad, or that you're losing 5 people here and 5 people there, or it could be that just one of them is the one that's actually causing your problem. You don't know based on qualitative research. And unfortunately, I mean, you can get some sense from watching people, see which ones are really, where people are really struggling versus, just having a little bit of problem. But really, you don't know until you come up with some solutions and start trying to fix things and see what really happens. So when I'm making a product change like this, I like to come up with what I call solution hypotheses. And I'll often come up with several different solution hypotheses. And the reason that I do this is because if I'm going to test to see if a change was successful, I need to know what success looks like. And equally, I need to know what failure looks like. If there's more than one way to solve the user problem, and there generally is, right? I like to list the possible negative consequences of the change as well as the positive ones, so that I can understand, I can predict what's going to happen if I implement this solution. So, let's take, for example, one of the problems. We're just going to pick one of the problems that we saw, which is the promo code thing. In our hypothetical research, people look for a promo code and then they just wandered off from the checkout funnel. Great. Again, I'm not saying without a doubt that this is the major problem. I'm not saying, but it is one that we observed, and it's one that we can, come up with a solution for. So, easiest solution, remove the box, right? Good. Fantastic. People see the box, flee. Get rid of it. Problem solved. So, our hypothesis is that if we remove the promo code, we'll see an increase in conversion. Now, what often happens is people say to me, oh my God, I read that blog post, and that's totally what's happening, and we should just get rid of it, and then they get rid of it, and then they ship it, and then they get distracted by something shiny and they never come back to it again. You know, they just assume that problem went away. Except, so there was probably a reason that promo code was there in the first place, right? Like, probably helping with acquisition, maybe? Maybe it was converting some really price-sensitive people. Maybe it was the kind of thing that you use to promote things and have sales and drive a lot of people in. So if you're going to implement a change, you need to know what the possible negative consequences of that change are going to be, so that you can predict them and so that you can keep an eye on those particular metrics when you change the thing that you're planning on changing. And remember, once again, nothing that I'm predicting here about this is, conversion is going to go up, acquisition is going to go down. None of that is true necessarily. These are predictions. I am predicting the future based on data, and based on data, both quantitative and qualitative. So it's more likely to be true, but it is still a prediction. And we need to figure out a way to test it, which brings us to step 4, which is, of course, the most important step, which is learn and iterate. Because if we're not learning and iterating, we're just flinging products out into the void, right? We're just assuming that the changes that we made are going to fix the problems that we saw, both quantitatively and qualitatively. And for this step, for the learning and iterating, again, we're going to use a combination of quant and qual. So, how would we know if we were right? Just objectively speaking. Well, an A/B test is an outstanding way to figure out if the change that we made improved the metric that we wanted to change and didn't hurt the metrics that we didn't want to hurt, right? That's quantitative testing. We're going to do some quantitative testing with an A/B test to see if just removing the promo code fixes things without hurting. So, and then, is anybody here not comfortable with what A/B testing is? To be honest, no. That's fine. We can talk about it later, or we can talk about it now. But what we want to do with an A/B test is we want to test what happens with the change versus what happens without the change. So you've got 2 branches. Some of the people see the page with the change, some see it without the change, and then we test to see which one has better metrics. You can kind of see the 2 different funnels. We can look at the metrics in both. So let's say that the A/B test comes out great. We're super excited. We're no longer losing 36 people at that step. We're losing 20. We haven't seen too much of a decrease in acquisition, so that's good. Fantastic. That's great. We're done, right? Yeah? No. We need to know why we were right. I can't tell you how often people sort of do these A/B tests and then go, well, that's fantastic. We predicted this change. We made the change. Exactly what we predicted came true. Fantastic. I don't need to worry about this anymore. It's always a good idea to rerun your qualitative, especially your observational usability tests at this point, just to make sure that the thing that is happening for the reason that you think it is happening. All right, sure, you're not, in this particular case, you're probably not going to be losing people. They're not going to be wandering off to, get a retail code anymore. But you might have introduced some other problem that you have no idea about. Maybe it's no longer working for people. I've certainly seen that. So make sure to redo your qualitative testing just to make sure that you understand what is happening and why it is happening. And of course, if we weren't right, or if we weren't right enough, suddenly we're not losing 36 people, we're losing 34 people, and we wanted to see if we could improve things more, we might go on and we might implement a different solution to the problem that we saw in testing, or we might try addressing other problems that we saw during testing. That's fine, whatever it is, we we keep iterating and learning until we are happy with the results, and until our metrics look the way that we want them to look. And when we're done enough, then we can go back through the steps and identify a new problem by looking at our quantitative data again. You have a question?
Yes, real quick question.
Sure.
What is the bigger problem? Losing 36 people at the top, or losing 50% of the remaining people 2 steps below.
I think the 36 people was the biggest.
30.
That was the biggest drop.
Oh, but
That-
is it absolute people that you're looking at in terms of, or is it percentage drop off from,
It's whatever you want.
okay,
It's whatever's important. I mean, the biggest percentage will be the biggest number of people. Well, actually, that's
Not
not entirely,
lower
no,
down.
yeah, not at the bottom, that's true. So what I generally like to say is that I like to go for the biggest number of people because there's no sense in, pouring a whole bunch of people, losing 90% at the, or even losing 10% at the top can be a huge number of people, rather than optimizing for that little tiny
so you
percentage at
start
the bottom. Yeah.
generally at the top unless there's something substantial?
Unless it's enormous, unless there's some enormous thing, yeah. So I generally go for the sheer number of people versus the percentage, but you can look at it either way. But you're absolutely right. When you get to the bottom, if you've already sort of, you could lose half, but you're only losing 5 people because you've already lost all these other people the steps. Yeah, math. Nothing's more fun than making me do math on the fly.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring up, is that process the only way to do this? The 3 steps or the 4 steps that we did? Yeah, that's it. No, there's lots of other ways to combine qual and quant. Let's go through one more. Let's try a different combination of qual and quant. This time we're going to start differently. This time, instead of starting from quant, we're going to start from qual. So you could start with the usability test again. Could be task-based, could be observational, could be whatever you want. Or you could start with some other type of qualitative research. You could, for example, call some customers and discuss with them what issues they're having when using your product, or what things they're having to use other products to do. Another great form of qualitative research that you can try if you want to generate hypotheses. This is generative user research because we're generating hypotheses. If we want to do generative research, we can call former users to find out why they're former. That is, why they left. Every time I suggest to anybody that they call former users, they always look at me like, that's so hard. It is. You should do it anyway. You learn a tremendous amount when you talk to people who've left you. Find out why they left. There we go. So since we started with the why, now we have to understand the what. And that's going to be step 2. And the idea here is to take what we've learned in the qualitative and try to predict, again, we're going to predict how it might affect those metrics. So remember from our first walkthrough, we started from metrics, we started from the what, then we went to the why. We're doing the opposite here. And you may be wondering why we bother to do this. Why would we bother to predict what metrics would change? Right? We saw this problem. This is actually a problem that I see all the time with user researchers and user experience designers, of which I am one, so I get to criticize us. One of the things that I see a lot is that we go, but it's a huge user problem. I saw it. People are struggling. You're doing something terrible to these people. That may all be true. But you still want to know, if I fix that problem for the users, what metric do I expect to improve? And the reason that I care about that is that we don't fix all the things. We live in a resource-constrained environment. We don't get to fix every single problem that we see. We have to make choices and we have to prioritize. And one of the ways that we do that is to prioritize based on the metrics that we want to improve. If we think that fixing a problem is going to fix retention, that's wonderful. Maybe we want to fix retention. Well, maybe we only have 3 users. Maybe retention's not the most important thing that we could concentrate on right this second. Maybe we should fix some things in our acquisition or in our conversion funnel, right? So at this step, we want to predict what metric is going to be fixed if we fix the problem that we observed. Step 3 is exactly what it was before. You create solution hypotheses, you figure out what you think will you predict, what you think will go right, what you think will go wrong, and then there we go. So here's the thing. You'll notice this one's different. We're not going to go through the whole process again. I've gone through it twice. That's enough. But I want to point out that this doesn't just work for products. This works for services. It works for processes. You can combine qual and quant techniques to look at your sales process, right? You can identify places that people are falling out of your sales funnel, your sales pipeline, I guess it's called. Sorry, I'm not a salesperson, as you can tell. Whatever you do, however you do it, however you combine qual and quant, whether you're doing it to a process or a product or a funnel or a checkout flow, this continues to be the most important step. Learn and iterate. And learn using both qualitative and quantitative measures. And you know what? You should combine this stuff yourself. You're going to come up with a process of your very own. You're going to use some different qualitative methodology, and you're going to use some different kind of metrics or analytics, and that's fine. Just remember, quantitative data will always tell you what is going on, and qualitative data will always tell you why it is happening. No. And if you do it correctly, I swear you will build better products. So we're going to do questions. Before we do questions, actually, if anybody's interested in the Velocity Conference, that I was asked to put this in by my publisher. But the Velocity Conference is actually awesome. And Jez Humble, who is the author of Lean Enterprise, he's the co-author of Lean Enterprise, will be speaking there. We'll be doing a keynote. And there is a discount code. You can use LKLean20.
Has anyone been to Velocity before?
It's really good.
What is it?
No, it's very clear.
It's focused on, like, we'll see web operations and performance as a subtag. That's what really it's about. But it started several years ago. It's really good.
It is, and yet, like I said, Jez is going to be speaking, and he did Lean Enterprise. So if you're doing any kind of big company stuff, it's interesting. So let's take some questions. Anything about qualitative or quantitative? Yes.
Yeah, do you have some favorite ways of doing the qual? Phone interviews, in person, screen captures, what do you like?
All of those. I love all of those. Also, usertesting.com. No. No, that's actually true. I've used usertesting.com. So, again, it depends on what you want to learn. Oh, I know what I can plug. I know. Thank you. Were you put in the audience on purpose? I did a Udemy class that I just released that there is a $29 coupon for that specifically addresses this. It figures out what you want to learn, and then you go through a process and a framework to figure out what kind of methodology you might want to use. So yes, sometimes you want to do ethnography. Sometimes you want to do task-based usability. Sometimes you want to do observational. All of those, not surveys. Don't do surveys. Don't do focus groups. They're just too hard to get right. But all of those are fabulous ways of generating ideas and generating hypotheses and finding problems and finding needs. But it depends on what kind of thing you're trying to learn, whether you're trying to learn about your user or your product, whether you're trying to learn what or why. So it's really important to get that right, because you really don't want to do task-based usability if what you should be doing is customer development. I actually see that a lot. I see a lot of people, especially I see a ton of people doing guerrilla usability testing, where you go to a coffee shop and just go, will you look at my product? And that's fine, that's fantastic if you're trying to learn a very specific thing, which is can a person who just wants to get coffee understand this thing in 5 minutes? But if you're building a big SaaS enterprise product, then it's completely useless. And if you want to actually find out if somebody would use your product or likes it, it's awful. If you want to find out, God forbid, if somebody would buy it, don't do that. So I think that the trick is to sort of understand what the different methodologies are and pick the right one. Yes.
I have two questions, very quick. One is, what do you do if you want to find out if the customer actually wants to buy it or not?
What do you do if you actually want to find out if the customer wants to buy it or not?
Yeah.
My God, this is such a great question because I literally just published an article about this today online in Boxes and Arrows. I published something called Intent to Solve. So one of the things that people really like to do is they love to ask, will you buy this product? And the answer is,
Of course I would.
sure, yes, or no, depending on how I feel. But it turns out that people are terrible at predicting the future. What people are really good at is telling stories about the past. And they're really good at talking about problems that they have. So one way that I really like to use to understand if people would buy a product or a solution to a problem, because I think of most products as solutions to problems. One thing that I like to ask them about is how they've attempted to solve that problem in the past. And the example that I give in the article, which means you don't have to read it now, so taking away all those hits from Boxes and Arrows, is, if you're a gym owner, right, and you're talking to 3 different people, and one person is like, oh, I am in terrible shape, and, it's just awful, but, I'm totally going to join, this is going to be the year, I'm totally joining a gym this year. Never done it before, but I'm totally doing it this year, right? That seems like a person who, great, they just said they're definitely going to join a gym. They're never going to join a gym. Do you know why? Because they've never joined a gym. Yeah. Yes, occasionally people change their behavior, but it's really unusual, right? Then you talk to somebody who's like, yeah, no, I've got this workout program and it's great, and I go running all the time, and so you're like, okay, well, great, they don't even have the problem, right? They don't even have the problem that I solved. But then you talk to somebody else who says something like, yeah, I've belonged to 15 gyms in my life, and yeah, great, they are your target because they have already shown an intent, a past intent to solve the problem. So that is one really good way to predict. And a lot of times people, you'll be talking to people and say, well, how do you solve this problem now? Oh man, I tried using this one product and it just didn't really work and it was awful. Well, what was awful about it? You can kind of understand why they tried it, what their problems were, what they were trying to solve, why it didn't work for them. Right? Anyway, Udolmar.
Okay, thanks. The second question is, how often should we iterate that learning and improve process?
Constantly. Seriously, yeah. One of the things about Lean is, the build, measure, learn loop, right? There's the build, measure, everybody familiar with the build, measure, learn loop? I think hopefully it's self-explanatory. You build something, you measure it, and then you learn from it. So that's great, and it's a loop for a reason. But one of the things that we like to do in Lean is we like to keep that loop pretty tight. Because what we don't ever want to do is we don't want to get into that situation where we go, building something for 6 months before we start measuring or learning from it. Because, a lot of things can happen in 6 months. A lot of things can happen in the world. A lot of things can happen with our users. So we want to be constantly getting feedback, whether it's quantitative or qualitative or some combination of it, just in order to now, obviously, by constantly, I don't mean every day or every minute, but try to focus on building something that is small enough that you can get it out and get feedback on it as quickly as you can for the thing that you're working on. And try to eliminate a lot of the waste that happens with these really long cycles where lots of things happen.
So you talked about how quantitative data doesn't tell you what you need to build in the future.
Yep.
So that's why you should talk to your customers.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that often when you talk to people, they really focus on what they already have and what they're already using. So what are your ways to get them to think about something that's beyond what they already have? Right.
So your users shouldn't be designing your product. When I say talk to your users, I'm really glad that you asked this because this is one of those sort of this is a great, if I'd asked people what I wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Well, then you asked the wrong question. Don't ask somebody what they want. Ask somebody what their problems are. Right? If you ask them what their problems are and how they try to solve them and how their work life is or their home life or what context they use products in or what products they already use, if you understand your user, your job is to design the right solution to the problem. But what you're doing is you're finding problems. They're telling you all about their problems. People are fantastic at telling you problems. And that's true. They will tell you, well, this is my problem with this product, with your product. Like, I hate this. And then they'll give you all sorts of solutions, some of which might be close to right, and some of which won't be. But your job is to talk to enough people that you can start to see patterns of problems and say, this person had this problem, this person had this like similar one, and oh, okay, great. I think that there is a thing that we can do that will solve all of those problems for those people. It's not necessarily just, removing the promo code box, honestly. That's, a silly, small example. But maybe it's something else. Maybe it's, having one-click checkout. Maybe it's reducing those 73 steps on the funnel to 2, But that's designing the solution is your job. Finding the problem, telling you about their problems is the user's job. Does that make sense?
Cool. You got one right, actually.
Oh, we have one. We have one
The
right.
mic. Put your hand up and we'll get the mic.
So sometimes I feel the step 1 and 2, step 3 is not linear. Actually, sometimes you might feel that you finish step 2, you want to go back to step 1, and then identify another problem that you think might be bigger than your first assumption.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's totally reasonable. Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes
so
that, yes.
That's okay,
Yes.
right?
When I present, it's a great point. Sometimes I present things in steps because I think people think in steps, but it is absolutely true. Although one thing that I will warn you about doing, don't get too. You don't always want to do that. You want to be careful when you do that because if you have so for example, if you've identified a problem, and then you go on, for example, you predict what metric it'll change. Like I said, you might say, oh, this is a huge problem. Yeah, but the metric that it's going to change is retention, and we decided that we don't care about retention right now. That's a great example. Then go, okay, well, let's go back and find some other problems, right? We don't need to build something, launch something just to build it and launch it. I mean, we'll find other things for the engineers to do. And this should all be going pretty quickly. But be careful not to cut yourself off too early before you measure and learn. Don't do it too often because what I have found is that the actual building and getting things out in front of people and doing that step 4, like getting all the way to step 4, makes you a better predictor. So the more often you can get through the whole cycle of steps 1 through 4, the better you're going to get at predicting, the better you're going to get at understanding, what metrics translate into what user problems.
I had a question about the second example, I think, of the first step process that you showed, where you started with qualitative data and then went to quantitative data. And I do, and my clients do, have trouble deciding what those metrics then should be based on the qualitative. So I was wondering if you had tips on how to know what metrics relate to the.
Yeah, do it a lot. I mean, to a certain extent, there's some experience in it, right? And there's understanding your user. But there's also, like, if you have a good idea of what the different metrics that you care about are, and if you actually think about, so for example, about Dave McClure's pirate metrics, right? Acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referral are his thing. So that's one way of looking at it, right? And generally, you can figure out where things fit in at that high level. If you fix something, you can generally kind of figure out, like, this is probably gonna affect revenue, or this is a thing that we saw amongst power users, so very likely to affect retention. This was a problem that we saw with brand new users, part of the onboarding process. Well, that's almost certainly going to affect, engagement or conversion. So those are, if you figure it out at that high level, I think part of the problem is that sometimes people really think about the metrics at this incredibly granular level. Is that what you're getting at? Yeah. So where they're like worried about, my favorite example is like, oh, we're going to launch comments on our site. This is like a totally old school example, but like, oh, we're going to put comments on, and then what metric are we going to measure? Let's see, we'll measure how many comments people leave. Who cares? Right? Like, what if they're, because then what happens if you start measuring something like how many comments people leave, then you start gaming the system to like get people to leave more comments, screw that. Don't worry about how many comments people leave. Worry about something that matters. Worry about if people leave comments, do they buy more stuff from you? If people read comments, do they leave in horror at the comments that they've just read, right? What happens that matters, not necessarily some vanity metric that you made up, like number of comments. Like, yeah, can I get people to leave more comments? Yes. I can give them all kinds of extrinsic, encouragement to do that, right? But that's not a useful metric. And I think that may be where people struggle, because they're not thinking at this sort of higher level of the metric. So thank you, that's a really good clarification, I appreciate it.
Do you have any rules of thumb with regards to how large a data set you're looking at in terms of some of these tests, both from a quantitative perspective and the qualitative?
I'm going to tell you a shorthand that I heard, and somebody who's good at math is going to shout me down. And that'll be great.
I'm good at math, but I'm not sure.
Fantastic.
I'll cover you.
Go
Good at
ahead.
math too.
So I read an interesting post that if you're doing an A/B test, just a straight up split test, that there's going to be some, let's say it's a conversion test, right? So it's, 100 people enter, 18 people sign up. If you get to 300 people, not at the top of the funnel, but 300 people who've actually converted in each branch, that you're probably safe in terms of statistical significance. And that you don't need to worry about doing, really strict statistical significance and t-tests and all those things that I swear to God I took statistics like 3 times and did fine, but don't remember a word of it. So that is a rule of thumb. I generally get the help of a data scientist when I want to make really hard decisions like that.
How about on the qualitative side?
On the qualitative side,
Interviews
yeah.
and those kinds of things.
Yeah, so for straight up task-based usability, the number is 5. But here's the thing. It's actually sort of 4 to 6. If you read Jacob Nielsen, he'll just tell you that. You start to actually see diminishing returns in terms of task-based usability, finding problems after about 3. And after about 5, you've generally found the biggest problems. The reason for this is that in usability testing, you're not, again, trying to find all the problems. You're trying to find the biggest problems. Now, I say 5, and people are like, woohoo, I did 5 usability tests. I'm done. No. It is 5 at a time. Not in a focus group, but 5 sessions. Make changes, do something, fix something, predict something, ship it. And if you're doing prototype testing, fix the prototype, do 5 more. If you're doing generative testing, if you're doing that like customer interviews and those sorts of things, again, you could go with the 5, but you want to make sure that it's 5 in the same persona. So if you've got a product that has a ton of different personas, you want to make sure that the people that you're talking to are 5 really similar people, that they are all using your product for the same reason and for the same kind of thing. And what I generally like to say is, do 5. If you're not starting to see patterns, really strong patterns, fix your recruiting, fix your personas, get new people, do it again. What I like to do is I like to be able to predict from the next set of 5 what I'm going to hear. And I will keep doing sets of really 4 to 6 until out of the next 10 people I talk to, I have predicted that there's going to be a serious problem or they're going to behave in a particular way, and I am right 8 out of 10 times. So that's my weird method.
Thank you.
So we often run A/B testing.
Thank you.
So we often run A/B testing on our product experiment. But we don't do is to redo the qualitative testing. I want to learn how do you make sure once we know the winner in the A/B testing, how do you make sure the winner is not affecting our metrics? And what if it's affecting our metrics? How do we validate this testing is working?
I'm not sure I understood the second part of the question. I understand that you do the A/B testing, but then something wins, and then you go, yay, winner, and you move
Yeah,
on.
so so this the
pretty good.
winner is improving the metrics that we were original want to improve.
Yeah,
But it might affect the other metrics.
it might, and you should check that. But you do that quantitatively. The reason that you want to do qual again afterwards, very short story, promise. I had a client who had released 2 different versions of his product and in an A/B test, and he was like, yeah, so B just clearly won. And I looked at the different versions, and I was like, dude, A should have won. Like, B is terrible. Like, I will stake my reputation, like, something weird is going on. They're like, but B won. So we're gonna go with B. And I was like, okay, well, let's just do some qualitative testing and try to understand why B won. Well, it turned out that there was this weird bug in A for like 30% of the users that it just broke, right? And so A was really better. It was just slightly broken for some of the people. And so once they fixed that, all of a sudden A was the winner. And so it's really important to understand why a particular branch is winning or not winning.
And you found that through qualitative?
I did, yeah.
I find that really, I mean, so it sounds good, but realistically, in any, projects I've been through, I mean, we stopped at probably the A/B testing, and B is a clear winner through, and we just moved on. We never actually looked back to do this last step of, so, do you see that often? Like,
yeah, I do. The other thing to remember is that the step 4 is learn and iterate. And so one of the ways to think about it, if it's hard to, convince people that like, no, we should actually, continue to do qualitative testing. One thing to think about is like this is your product and you're going to continue to do user research on it. You're going to continue to do usability studies on it. You're going to continue to watch people use it. So you can release, whichever branch wins, but you should still be doing qualitative testing on the product overall kind of all the time, right? So that you do catch those kinds of things when they happen.
because I was thinking the example you gave, thank God that person asked you who's experienced and looked at A and B and say A should have won.
Yeah.
But what if you don't have that kind of person to say A should have won when B is clearly winning?
Yeah, so that was actually an interesting one because in that particular case, they had done it wasn't a complete redesign, I don't really love complete redesigns, but they had changed some significant things. And they felt like their changes should have improved things and their changes hurt things, which is why they brought me in. So like, we did everything you said, like we talked to users, we found problems, we thought we fixed them and it made it worse. Come fix it. I was like, oh, you have a bug. Pay me. No, we made some improvements. That would have been great, though. That would have been a much better story. But they had done everything right. So that was actually why they brought somebody in, because they were just confused by the fact that they really thought they'd improved things. So they really had. It's just that there was this weird bug that only happened. It didn't happen internally in testing because it only happened on slow computers. Nobody ever tests on actual user computers.
Yeah, I would just add in, you discover all kinds of things in qualitative you don't see in quantitative like that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, they're using Firefox. Oh, JavaScript.
Oh, look,
there. Like,
they're
all
still
this
on
stuff.
IE7.
Yeah, right. And I guess the other thing you compare the A/B, if you only look at A/B, the bottom line is like, if you're comparing A and B, like their B was probably too low. The impact of what you just said is B won, but it was still too low.
It was still terrible.
It should have been
Yeah.
lower. So there's some absolute reference, right?
That's the other thing to remember is that everybody's like, oh, we're just going to A/B test them, that's going to be great. Okay, if A and B both suck, winner's going to suck. Like, you don't get to not sucking by comparing two terrible things. You got two people like me running a race. We're not winning any awards.
B sucks less.
We are not setting any records.
Sounds like election season, Jerry.
Or I find that a lot of folks that have data, it's a little bit easier to say like, look, we're measuring things, we have analytics, right? Because you can passively be collecting and not be doing anything, right?
Yes.
So their substitute, doing nothing is great. So how do you kind of convince people the importance of qualitative, where takes work, right? You can't
I'm sorry, I get this question every time.
It might have been from me last time.
Yeah,
too.
it probably was. No, I swear it was. Every time I talk to you, no, please, go on, it's a great question. I should just have a slide about it. I mean, it's clearly the best question, because it gets asked every time. Like, clearly this is a problem for people.
Right, because there's a certain level of...
How do I convince engineers that talking to humans is important? Is that the question? Dude, I used to be an engineer, so I get to make fun of them too.
Well, back to your point about like big data, right? We've heard data, and we know qualitative is a different type of data. But I think it's one of those like, oh, you're talking to 5 people. I have lots of, 20,000 people that did this. That just doesn't make sense in my mind. How do you convince someone that qualitative really matters, but you're not going to get an output or a result immediately? We're going to have to revalidate and verify with the data again.
So two things. I go ahead and just do user research. That's one of the things. So just when people are like, no, we have data, we don't do user research. I'm like, that's great. You go on with your bad self. I'm just going to be over here actually talking to your users. And then what happens is, all of a sudden, when I'm like, we should do this, and we should A/B test it, all of a sudden, my A/B test predictions get way better than everybody else's. Because they're based on something, not just, wouldn't it be cool if I did this thing? So in that case, you're actually using it to generate better ideas. So once you start winning, and in fact, so I actually implemented at one company, something called the hypothesis tracker, or long bets for product, which is, oh, that's what you think, is it? Fantastic, let's write it down. I got this from Eric Reese, actually, because at the end of it, everybody, when something goes well, it was everybody's idea. When something goes badly, nobody can remember who, championed it. So write it down. What's your prediction? What do you think is going to happen? Look, your predictions are worse with your data than, that's data, right? Let's do that. And I think that matters. The other thing that I make people do is I make people watch videos. So they'll be like, oh, but you have all this data. And I'm like, look at what you're doing to this person. I have a friend who calls them hostage videos. He'll leave the room if I'm he's like, I can't watch it. I can't see what I'm doing to this. I'm like, yeah, watch it. This is you. It's your fault. But no, you should make people watch the videos. And it turns out, right, that engineers can be really empathetic when forced to view users using their product. They don't want to ship crap. They don't want to ship things to other people. They want to ship good things. I think that they're fundamentally good people. You're forced to be. I'm sorry. I love engineers. We have, get you a mic? Oh, one.
You made a comment in passing that I thought interesting. You said not to do surveys, not to do focus groups. And I'm wondering why you're down on those. Is that absolute advice? And the reason I ask is because previously in my career we did a focus group and it was pretty helpful for us.
Okay, I have found that focus groups are a great way to spend a lot of time recruiting 12 people and getting one opinion. So focus groups, it's not that you don't get anything useful out of focus groups, it's that my experience and the experience of a lot of researchers has been that interviewing those 12 people separately actually just gets you much better information. The other thing that I'll tell you is that focus groups specifically are incredibly hard to run well. These are not a beginner thing, right? And most of the people that I talk to are not highly trained focus group moderators. It's just sort of like, that's gonna be harder for you to learn than good one-on-one moderating. And if you screw one up, you can really get a lot of bad information if you don't sort of know how to control the room and get good feedback from different people. And you can really get very much of an echo chamber when you're doing one. And it's when one starts to go badly, they can really go badly. So I recommend that people not do them. If you have had a good experience with them and you have a good moderator, or you think, you can try it, but I recommend against it. Surveys, there's a fabulous post by Erica Hall, who is Mule Girl on Twitter, that she just posted it a little while ago on Medium about surveys and why surveys are dangerous. Again, it's because people are really bad at writing good ones, and people tend to use them for things that they're not meant to do. People use them to try to generate ideas. Surveys are very much an evaluative technique. But if you have a survey and one of the questions is, what's your favorite color, red, green, or blue, you're never gonna hear orange, right? You're never gonna get, there's no information that is going to come into the process. And if you're trying to generate ideas, you don't want to close off all of those pathways to hearing interesting things, before you even get started. So read Erica Hall's old blog post. She does a much better job of explaining than I do. But again, they're kind of an advanced technique, oddly.
I would just jump. I totally agree with both those things.
Thanks. And literally
hard.
nothing else that I've said clearly because you haven't endorsed.
No, I do. But it's like going back
The
to
rest of it was crap.
If you A/B test one-on-one interviews versus focus groups, one-on-one interviews will win.
They take a little longer, but you gotta do all the recruiting anyway.
But sometimes the surveys take a lot longer because you really need to build a very good one to get the metrics you wanted.
Yep.
So first you need to decide what you really want.
Yeah.
And then build again. A lot of people don't know how to build the surveys.
Yeah. I'm actually less down on surveys than I'm on focus groups. But again, very hard to do them right. Oh, and there is one huge exception for the don't do surveys rule, which is always rate screeners. Screeners or surveys. You need to write good screeners to get the right people in your research. So you do screener surveys. So people are always like, haha, but you're talking about surveys now. And you're like, yes, you use them to screen out bad.
Could you explain screeners for people who may not know what they are?
Yes. Screeners are a method of recruiting the correct people for your research. So if you decide that you want to talk to left-handed dentists who live in Boise, then you would write a survey and you would put it out into the world in various different ways. I actually have a recruiting pamphlet that I sell because I don't like explaining this in depth. You would put it out in the world, and then you would have questions like, what do you do for a living? I am a doctor, I am a dentist, I am a lawyer, I am something else, and then you go through and you get all the answers back and you go, oh, here is a dentist who identifies as left-handed, who lives in Boise, fantastic, you are in the study. That's a screener.
Cool. And for those of you people are sharing the links that she's mentioning to the articles. If you guys just go and set up a little search term on Lean Prod Meetup, you'll see all the links to all the articles she's mentioned.
Cool. Thank you, whoever's doing that.
Sure. I'm actually a researcher, so it wasn't in the earlier questions. We weren't in survey. We weren't orange in the original questions. But I have a question about sort of discovery research and so I'm working on a team that is building a product that doesn't exist. We don't have metrics, but we are trying to combine different kinds of methodologies and think creatively since we're pretty sure we understand the user journey. We spent a lot of time. I personally have done over 120 interviews. So I think I get what the user problem is. So now we're at the step of, okay, some rough concepts. And, I feel like the team has a lot of different opinions. So I'd like to hear your opinion. So we understand the user journey. We have it in detail. It's been socialized. We think we have some key concepts. What next? And is there a way we could use some quantitative to make sure that our, educated guess is the right one?
Yes. Yes. This is a fabulous question. There is so in the traditional user-centered design methodology, you do the needs finding, and then you do design, and then you do prototyping, and that's just kind of the way it goes. And it's, there's needs finding, and then there's ideation, and that's fantastic. I think it's missing step, and I think that step is largely fixed by Lean Startup. I think that's what Lean Startup was designed to address in many ways. A lot of other things, but I think it does a lovely job of addressing this. You need to do some sort of a validation test, right? You need to validate that. So you have validated the hell out of that problem, right? You know that there's a problem. You need to validate your solution idea before you build something, before you go off and spend a year building something. So you need to figure out the smallest possible thing that you can build to validate whether your solution is headed in the right direction. I strongly recommend reading the Lean Startup for lots of information about this. There is a video of me from the Lean Startup Conference 2013. It is called Landing Pages and Beyond, How to Find Out If Your Idea is Stupid. And it talks about using landing pages, concierge, Wizard of Oz, selling, something else, and this thing. But all these different sorts of methodologies for figuring out if your solution idea is a good one. It's not just like throwing up a landing page. In fact, that's sort of like that is one of the things you can do. But like you can run concierge tests, you can run Wizard of Oz tests. It's not like your choice is between no validation and just build the whole thing and go out and get validation. You need to actually figure out if the solution direction that you're going is good. And I think that you do that. I mean, that's really the MVP concept, right? Like, what is the MVP? And an MVP is not a crappy product. Sorry, just like to point that out because I say MVP and people are like, oh, well, just build something crappy. No, you won't. You'll build something small. So figure out what is the smallest possible thing that you could build to figure that out. I don't know the answer to that. You can talk to me afterward and we can brainstorm and figure out whether you could do like a concierge test or something. I don't know. Oh, just so you know, my email address is up there and I do respond to all emails eventually. So if you guys have any specific questions, feel free to email me afterwards.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and stop the QA. Are you going to be around to talk to people? Okay, cool. And you got her email there. So let's give Laura a big hand. Thanks for all the great questions and being so engaged, guys. Now comes the giveaway fun part. So thanks for sticking around. Get your tweets in. Got a couple more minutes. And yeah, thanks to the people that were sharing the articles. That was very helpful. Okay. Are those my kids? I sure will. I thought I'd just share a couple things real quick too. I love the qualitative, quantitative stuff, and the way I call it Oprah versus Spock, basically, as a shorthand. Oprah has nice, long, one-on-one interviews, all about the why, and Spock's Mr. Data. I just wanted to share that. And then this is Laura's article on boxes and arrows. Oh, it's not coming up, is it? Jeez, hold on. Let me do some. Sorry, that's my kids. That's on my desktop. That's not what I'm trying to show. How did that get there? Oh, here's another one. Here we go. Good. Okay. So here's her article on boxes and arrows called Intent to Solve. You guys want to read that one? And then I wanted to share, has anyone heard of Christian Rohr? He has a really great framework. He kind of blew it out on a 2x2 of qualitative and quantitative, which is what Laura talked about today, and then attitudinal and behavioral, and plotted like 22 different research methodologies in there. And then there's also a color coding to like talk about how the context of use and things like that. Anyway, it's on the Nielsen Norman Group website. I recommend checking that out, and you can come see me if you want a link. Or I'll tweet that link too. Here is Erica Hall's article on surveys. I didn't get a chance to fully read it, but it looks pretty good. Looks really good. Cool. Just want to show those things. All right.